Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Jennifer Stewart.
Thank you for having me again.
I don't know if you're going to remember this, but it is a good preamble to what we're going to talk about today. You and I were talking a while back, and I believe it was right after you had just sold your practice, your first practice. And you told me, you said, I'm done. I'm out. I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish,
I'm a
and
liar. I'm back.
you're back. And you said there's other projects I'm working on. And then I got an email from you, what seemed like 4 days later. I know it was longer, and it said, "Yeah, it was basically I'm back." It was like that Michael Jordan moment where he retired and then returned, and that was his press release. It just said, "I'm back." So you had your own Michael Jordan moment there.
I didn't have my
Um,
Michael Jordan quotes ready for this. I did not know we were going to do a Michael Jordan reference. I didn't have my quote ready, so I'll have to
I
find
just
one.
dropped that on you. But before we get more into that, I want to talk about the transition from the your original practice to what you're doing now. But I'm just curious initially, what was your motivation for getting back into a private practice?
I actually missed patient care. I know that that is sometimes hard to believe when we're deep in the trenches of seeing patients day to day. And not everyone has the luxury of taking a year and a half. I'll put break in quotes if you're not watching this. I'm doing my air quotes. I didn't take a break. Truly, I was speaking and consulting and traveling and writing, but I took a break from patient care. And it made me realize that deep down, I really do enjoy it. And I love seeing patients. And I did miss running a business, running, having control over day-to-day operations, things that I was lecturing and speaking on, but I wasn't actually doing it. It made me realize, man, I do miss this.
I have found, and maybe you found the same thing, that when you're talking to successful people and you ask them what made them successful, a lot of times what they'll talk about is their failures. And I've come to realize something over the years that people that are successful aren't necessarily smarter than everybody else, but what they've done is they've tried more things. They've taken more risks. They've failed more often. But when they failed, they didn't give up. I think that's a key distinction. They didn't give up. They figured it out. I think it was Sarah Blakely who said entrepreneurship is like jumping off a cliff and assembling a plane on the way down. And I
Pretty
think there's
much
some,
it.
yeah, that's what it feels like. Um, and I usually invite people on here to share their success stories, and you're welcome to do that. But I'm putting you in a precarious position today of sharing your failures, what didn't work out, and what you learned along the way. I thought you'd have some interesting insights from someone who went through all the ups and downs of opening a practice and then moved on to another chapter of your life and then got back into it. What did you do differently that made you not only a better business owner, but maybe even a better doctor? So before we get into that second practice, the one you're in now, can you take us back to your first practice? What inspired you to open it, and what did that journey look like in the early years?
So I actually joined that. So I joined right out of basically almost right out of school. I graduated NECO in 2007 and I joined my prior practice in 2008. So I was a brand new doctor still. I picked up and moved to Connecticut for an opportunity to join a large, or at the time it was a small practice, and thought, I'll give it a year. If it doesn't work out, I can move back to New York and figure it out. And I was there for 15 years. So I joined as an associate. I bought in as a partner in 2010, grew it, it became a large practice. And then I stepped away and sold in June of 2022. So a long journey. It was almost my entire career. I learned a lot. And then I think I filed a lot of information away that was maybe I wasn't doing it intentionally, but I had thought of things that kind of popped up when I was opening here.
What point did you realize you were ready to sell? What was going on at that time that motivated that decision?
I had been there for my whole, it felt like my whole life. And my kids at the time, I have two boys who are now 9 and 12, and they were younger. And I thought, I think this is the opportunity that I want. I think it was after COVID. I think COVID made a lot of us really rethink our priorities and think about our lives. And I had been there so long and it had just been my whole life. And I thought, is there anything that I want to do that's different? And I want to spend more time with my kids. And that just kept coming up. And that was, everything I thought about, man, I wish I was available for that, or they have something at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. I wish I could easily make that. And it really came down to the fact once it was in my head that I thought, I think I want to spend more time with my family and figure out how to make that happen. Once it was in my head, once anything pops in my head, it's kind of a done deal and I just figure out how to do it. It might take me a while, but once that thought is there, it's very hard for me to get rid of it. So I thought, I'm going to take this leap, and I was very thankful for the opportunity I had, very thankful for my whole career there and for everything I did. But it was really my time to take a leap and think, what's next? I want to focus on doing more consulting and speaking, and maybe that's what I do forever, and maybe it's not. But at the time, it just felt right, and it was the right move for me.
See, I have the opposite problem. I always feel like I have 100 thoughts in my head at the same time, bouncing around like ping pong balls. Maybe we can talk later about that. That's a
That's
topic
another
for
call. That's
a
another
different call.
conversation. I'm like, once I make it, one of my friends who's also an optometrist always says she's opening a practice too. And she said, when you're with all these decisions, like, how do you make the decision? I said, once I make a decision, I'm done. And it really is, I don't, kind of think about it so much. I'm just kind of, here's what I want, and now I have to figure out how to do it. That's the harder part, I think, is getting it done. But once I've made a decision in my head, I guess it means I'm stubborn. I don't know. Maybe.
Let me ask you about that to dig into that a little bit more because it's interesting because it's not a necessarily a haphazard approach. When you decide something, you move forward with it. So here's what I've found, and I mentioned this before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But when I was taking my MBA classes, they asked us to, one of our assignments was we had to create a business plan. And these things are like, they're thick. And I remember even as I was doing it, I understand it was for a project for school, but I kept thinking, this seems like such a waste of time because there's so many factors and variables here that are hard to predict. And it's just a guess. It's a big guess. And more I got into the business world and started observing other businesses, other practices, I realized that so often success is a product of constantly experimenting and iterating with things really on a small scale. You don't necessarily want to show up at work tomorrow and do something that if you fail, you're going to lose the practice. But there's so many lessons to be learned through failure. That's where I started out. So, do you feel like that approach has allowed you to keep executing on things and not get stuck in that cycle of constantly ruminating and thinking, but just do it and see if it works? Because I'm going to guess that everything you've put your mind to and said we're going to do it didn't work out. But my guess is also that you learned from those things as well.
100%. And that's why I think I make decisions quickly because it's come with a thought process. I don't just wake up and one day and say, I'm going to do this. There's, some thoughts that have gone into that. But once I make the decision, I make it. And then, there is always the what if it doesn't work out, but I look at that after. I don't look at it as, should I do this? Should I not? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Should I, well, maybe, and go there. I'm like, no, I'm doing this. And then it's either going to work and it's going to be successful, or it's not going to work. And then I can pivot and make some changes. So I think my brain's always figuring that out, but it's really not getting caught up in the before and the, what if, what if, what if. It's what if it doesn't work out? Well, then I figure it out and I fix it. And, I just listened to a podcast with you and Adam talking, and oh gosh, I wish I had wrote down the quote. It was about the decisions. There's the haircut. Um, oh gosh, what was the quote? It was about, the
Did
types
I
of
say it or did Adam say it?
you both said it. It was a book. I think Adam said it, and it was about, the decisions we make and how permanent they are, and that there's different types of decisions. So I don't spend a lot of time on the decisions that are very small. I just kind of make them and move on. But yes, I've made many mistakes here, many mistakes in my former practice, and I think that's what's made me such a better business person, because I'm willing to take those mistakes, but I'm also willing to not just go, oh, this was a bad idea. Why did I cold start? Woe is me. I shouldn't have done this. And I made a huge mistake. I'm like, okay, now, okay, maybe this wasn't what I thought. How do I fix it? And what do I learn? And how do I make sure I don't make the mistake again? And what can I do from here?
I want to come back a little bit later to that why cold start part because I think there's a lot of people in a position of wanting to pursue private practice, but which way should they go? And I'm curious why you made the decision to go cold start instead of maybe buying an established practice. But let's put that on pause for a minute. I want to go back to the comments you made before about the work-life balance. And you mentioned your kids and wanting to be around more for your family and your kids. I went through something very similar when I decided to transition from patient care into consulting is I realized I had younger kids at the time and I wanted to be there for them. It's not to say I couldn't have done that within optometry, but I saw another path for me that interested me. But part of that as well was the ability to just have better hours, have more freedom, flexibility, and that factored into your decision as well. I notice it's a different discussion talking with I'll say a younger OD, somebody who maybe doesn't have a family yet, just getting started, and their goals and ambitions sometimes seem different than somebody who's maybe a little bit farther along, starting a family, has different priorities. How have your priorities changed? And I know you mentioned the kids, but do you just feel a sense of different goals? And could you give any insights on that to somebody who's maybe starting off in their career, how to sort of plan or at least be aware that their goals and aspirations might change as they advance in their career?
I think it's a great point. I think of myself 15 years ago and I was into everything. You asked me to go to a dinner, I was there. You asked me to fill in. I mean, I was the fill-in doctor before I bought my practice. I was taking on whatever job I could. I was going to every meeting and every conference, and I was just soaking up all I could because I had the time. And then when my kids even were little, I did that too because they didn't I thought they needed me, but now everyone who has kids realize the older they get, the more they need you. So in the baby stage, I didn't feel like they really needed me as much as they do now in fourth and sixth grade or in their elementary years. So I think that shifted kind of my priorities of what I did outside the practice, how many days I took off. I didn't take as many days off because I didn't feel, I thought, well, I'd rather see patients. And I financially, my goals were very different 15 years ago than they are today. And I can have the leeway and flexibility to do things a little bit differently. I think everything has changed, and my whole priorities of now, what is the second, third phase of my career? I don't even know what phase I'm in anymore, but that changes. And even how, and when we get into talking about the cold start, that really was why I developed a cold start and how I've set this business up. It's very different than what I would have done 15 years ago. The way it's designed, how it supports my new goals of my family really comes first for me. And I joke that 2025 is my year of no. I've said no to more this year in the first quarter of the year than I have ever had said no before. But I feel this, priority and sense of being with my family as much as I can. So that has taken over versus going to meetings and conferences and shows and doing those things. So I kind of I put my family first and make sure, like, okay, I can do that, but if it's virtual, I'm your girl because I can do it after dinner with my family, but I might not be traveling as much. And that's really looking at how I set this practice up. That again was the crux of all the decisions I made here.
That is a cruel hoax with kids, though. It's that you set this path
Yeah.
for spending more time with them, and then they become teenagers and they don't want anything to do with you. So,
So this conversation in a couple years might change because now they want me. So when they're 13 and 15, I might be like, you know what? I'll be at every meeting because they don't seem to want me around, but
yeah,
they need
just
me
like,
there. So
yeah, it's not that bad. I found with mine, the relationship's really good, but yeah, they start to become more independent. They want to hang out with their friends. And
they're
all of a
friends.
sudden, at the younger age, sometimes you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to get any sleep. And then now it's like, hey, don't you want to hang out with me? Let's go do something. But well, let's get into the precarious position that I spoke of before, the failures. And I think it's a good thing. I think sometimes, we hear that word failure and we think that's a bad thing, but it's really a good thing. It's the only way we learn and the only way we grow is that we're trying new things and we're learning from it. So let me just ask you, reflecting back on that first practice, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you made as a business owner where if you could go back in time, you would do it differently?
That's a good question. It's hard to think about those because I feel like I've moved on from that stage. It's hard for me even to reflect. I feel like that was the old Jen. So That's a good question. I don't even know what mistakes I made. I will say none, right? I made no mistakes
Look at
ever.
you.
I know.
All right,
So perfect.
we're gonna dig into that subconscious
Yeah, no.
because there's got to be
And I
you.
think there, I had the difference is I had a huge practice there. I had a partner and I had associate doctors and a huge staff. So I feel like if there were small mistakes there, it was easily absorbed, or there were, if you made a small change and it didn't work out, it was a less bigger deal there because it was such an established practice. We didn't make as many changes. We grew, so we had a very small space and then grew to a large space, which was a challenge at the time. But I think I always likened a big practice to a cruise ship. And any small changes you make, you have to make some pretty big changes to really steer that ship and to change the culture of the practice, or the way the practice runs. Or if you're going to change EHR, that's a huge deal and a big deal there. Or bring in a new frame line or do something. So I feel like small changes there were easier to make and quickly absorbed. And also, it was such an established practice that there weren't as many ways to gamble and be risky there. I think the only one that, I comes to mind is going from a very small space to a larger space. We were busting at the seams, so it had to be done, and it was, way overdue. So there was no mistake there. But I think, with a cold start, or a small practice, those small changes can make much more of an impact, either positive or negative. So I think it's even more impactful here when I make a change or take a risk, because it can, it can really affect our bottom line, and it can affect my staff. I have 1.5 team members here, where there I had 10. So there, anything we do is much more impactful here. And I think those changes can positively influence things much more, but also have the effect of it could really negatively impact us, as well.
That's something I learned going from practice into consulting is how valuable a team could be. And where you started with this, talking about the first practice, is that you basically had a committee
Yes.
of people around you. So when I was practicing, it was usually in smaller practices. And when I came on to do consulting and I had a team around me, I was like, oh, wow, there's so much value in being able to turn to your left or right and ask somebody. So you right now are in a position of not having as many people, but what would you say to somebody starting out who's in a similar position that doesn't have that experience and background that you have from an original practice? I personally think, and this is not a plug to get consulting help, just find people that can help you pick people's brains, go to conventions and talk to people over at lunch. Do not try to do this alone. But what are your thoughts on that for somebody who's now, let's say, going into a cold start?
That is my number one. I would say I echo that and I agree. And even just yesterday, I talked to two people who want a cold start, and one just doesn't want, wants to do it because they don't want to work with anybody else. And I said, well, that's okay. But I, what looks like, on the surface that it's a true success that somebody did all on their own, usually has a team behind them. So I did not do this alone. I am very lucky to have great friends who have cold started, great friends who have successful private practices that I talk to every single day. I did before, I did while I was opening this, and I still do. And we're all at different parts and places in our practices, but we still are trying to do better every day. So that doesn't stop once you cold start. But I would definitely say having a consultant. I did not. That's always the question I get. Did you use a consultant? I did not. But if I didn't know what I know, I would 100% recommend having that. I had a strong group of friends who helped me for free. So so thank you to my team of consultants. You know who you are. But having somebody, if it's not something, if you've never owned a practice or never been in the leadership role or the business side, having a consultant just to help guide you through the process and the timelines and the little things that you didn't think of is worth I will say, I won't say it's a small investment, but it is very worth the investment to both save you money and time, and have somebody to bounce ideas off of. So I agree, a team is essential. And even when you're in practice, like I even said to you, I texted you yesterday and said, I want to sit down and talk to you about what I'm going to do next. And you said, wait, we have a podcast tomorrow. So can that wait? So
Yeah, I
So
see the
even
moves.
me, I was inspired by listening to your podcast, and I thought, okay, now that I've been in here a year, what do I think? What do I want to do? And how does that look? And I'm never too shy to ask for help or to have somebody that I can bounce ideas off of.
I just think it saves you so much time to go to
Oh,
people. And I think people are happy to share what's worked for them and what hasn't. Instead of trying to experiment with everything from the ground up, is go find people who have been through it. I tell people all this time who are looking at getting into a specialty, and I don't know how many take me up on it, but I say, go find somebody who's been really successful at it. One caveat is make sure it's outside of your competitive area so they're willing to share. I don't care if you got to drive 3 states over, but find somebody who's been really successful and just ask them if you can just come shadow. You'll be as quiet as a mouse, sit in the background, observe the office, observe how they interact with the staff. Take them to lunch. Lunch is on you, and pick their brain at lunch and then be on your way. But I think you'll learn so much from that. I saw a post once on social media, and somebody said, "Is it worth it to hire a consultant?" And one of the responses was, "All," he said, they use your watch. All they do is use your watch to tell you what time it is." And okay, haha, it's a it was hard for me not to reply. Yeah,
yeah,
but a lot of ODs don't know what time it is, or
no,
don't know how to
no.
tell time, and
You don't know what you don't know,
you
and
don't know what you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it starts with just admitting, like, I don't know everything. I'm still learning
oh,
every day. You're
oh
still
my gosh.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did have help. I did hire a consultant to help me with my business plan. Could I have done that? Absolutely. But did I look at that and say, okay, what's the best use of my time right now? I have a timeline and there's a lot I have to do. I'm huge on, delegating and, the who's not the hows, and who can I hire to do this for me when, yes, I could do it myself, but am I going to write this beautiful business plan about my ideas and my vision, and the bank's going to look at it and go, you didn't put any financials in there.
Yeah.
Like, so that's always my big piece of advice is, how many of us went to school to learn to write a business plan? You did in your MBA program, but so many of us, maybe we did it in our fourth year of optometry school, but when it really comes down to the real life, I'm asking a bank for money. A consultant knows exactly what the bank is looking for in that document and what they're not looking for. It saved me probably months of time and energy and back and forth. And could I have done it? And, I know a lot of ODs like to save money, but did I have to spend money on it? Absolutely. Did it probably let me open a few months earlier? 100%. So it's weighing that cost with your what could be the opportunity cost that you've lost if you're doing it all yourself. And when I looked at it, I looked at it and went, oh my gosh, I would have never done this. This is this. I could have never written this. Maybe I could have, but it would have taken me months to figure out how to do it, where somebody else is so much better at that. The banks look at it and go, perfect. All the things we're looking for, all your financial forecasting is here. And they knew, they knew what the consultant knew what the banks were looking for. So could we do it all ourselves? Absolutely. Should we? Do we need to? I don't think we do.
What I find with having, we'll move on from this topic here, but I'll share this. What I find with having other people, a team, a committee to help you is they point out the things that you can't see. No pun intended, but they point out your blind spots. And you and I probably do this, and a lot of other people do, is we fall in love with our ideas, and we've got this idea and we're so in love with it that we can't see all the landmines around it, that we almost need somebody else to come in and say, hey, I tried it that way. Have you thought about that this is going to happen, or that person's not going to like it, or there's already a product out there? You see all the things that you otherwise would have gone 2 years, spent a lot of money, time, and resources, like a lot of companies, a lot of products, and you realize way too far down the road all the reasons this didn't work that if somebody else might have been able to shed light on right from the beginning. Um,
100%. I agree. And I mean, I still do it probably. I always think the way I want to do it, of course, is the best way. Because of course, if I'm doing it, it's the best way. So even my team, I always say the way that I think of doing something, and that's the benefit again of being a small practice, is here's the way I want to do it. But if you have an idea of how to do it better, I'm all ears. And it doesn't just because I want to do it one way or we've done it a way before. We just hired a new optician about 6 weeks ago who is experienced, and she's experienced in the software we use, and she is teaching us stuff that she said, have you ever thought of doing it this way? And, you know, some people can get a little hesitant to interject that into a new job, you know, to say, have you thought of it? And I said, if there's a way that you think we could be doing things better, I am all ears. There is nothing here set in stone. If there's a suggestion you have, please make it, and then we'll work on it together. And again, that might not work, or we might have tried that, but it's really, you know, kind of being open to doing things different ways, um, even if that's not the way I originally thought it would be.
Well, I asked you before about any failures, which you proudly stated there are none. So let's switch
It's
switch
over.
over.
No, I
Never.
wish.
I'm doing
I wish.
investigative work after this to see if
There,
I'm doing.
no
Yeah, I'm
mistakes.
going deep. I'm going
Here,
deep,
there's
Dan.
plenty. Oh, here, there's plenty. Oh my gosh.
What about your successes? So tell us about the things that you learned from your previous experience that you said, yes, this definitely, other than getting help from others, not trying to do it by yourself, but what are some other key things that you said, these are critical things I learned in my first go around with practice ownership that absolutely non-negotiably need to be part of my second practice?
I think we always had a, you know, it kind of sounds cheesy saying it, but a focus on the patient experience. I mean, that's kind of cliche to say because I mean, hopefully we're all doing that. That's what we did at my old practice, and that is the crux of Look New Canaan. It's completely different here. So it was something I really wanted to do, but having the ability to start fresh and start over makes it completely different, and it's a different experience here. But I was very focused on the patient. And that's why I came back, right? I love the patients and I love the business. So I learned a lot there on focusing on the optical, which is not a lot of doctors' main focus. It is my entire focus here. Everything in this practice is built around our optical. And I learned that at my former practice, but I think everything I learned there, I just took the pieces of optometry that I liked and that I really enjoyed doing. And that's what I do here. And I amplified that. And then I took the pieces of optometry I didn't love doing there, and I always say you can be honest in optometry. It's okay not to like everything, and that's allowed. So I thought about the things I didn't like doing there, and the types of care that I maybe didn't want to do anymore, and I don't do it here. So I was very specific and focused on the things that I did like there, and that I just wanted to focus on more. But it's easier to focus on a few things than to have everything as your focus. So I was able to kind of fine tune what I like doing and what I did successfully there. And I had time to reflect, you know, what types of patients do I like seeing? What am I good at? I'm not great at everything. What am I good at? What am I good at communicating? What do I enjoy learning about? What do I enjoy communicating with patients? If I were to only see one type of patient all day, what would that be? So I took the things I had learned there, and I saw everybody and everything. I did everything there, but I was able to take the pieces I liked and really work on that here successfully, of course.
Uh, I think that's a great point that anyone can do is look at what do I actually like doing because there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of burnout in this profession. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Sometimes people will ask me about a specialty because there's multiples. Is it dry eye? Is it myopia management, vision therapy? And they'll say, which one do you think I should go into? Which one could be the most profitable? And maybe other questions. And my first question to them is usually one they don't expect, but I'll say, what do you like doing? Like, you're not going to be happy doing vision therapy if you don't like kids.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be good at it either. So
No.
what do you really like to do? What interests you? You know, what gets you excited? Because that's going to be the fuel that keeps you going. And you talked before about pivot. I meant to circle back to that word. I think it's such a key word in practice ownership that people can look at is it's a good exercise to do is what we did recently at iDoc, stop, start, pivot, right? We really sat down as a team, not one person, but as a team, and we had a very honest, candid conversation about what do we do really good? What should we keep doing, right? What are the things that we should keep doing? What are the things that we should stop doing that are just not adding much value? It's adding a lot of headaches, it's adding a lot of paperwork, it's just not adding much value. And then where do we pivot? You know, what are the things that we're kind of doing well, but we just need to tweak it a little bit? So I think it's a great exercise for any practice to do. And sometimes you end up paring down the things that you don't like doing and saying, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore because I don't like it and I'm not good at it and there's no market for it and my patients aren't buying it. But I really like focusing in this area. And I think that's fine, especially in small business, which almost even a big optometry practice is a
Yeah,
small business,
yeah,
is making sure that you stay focused.
yeah,
That's going to vary from one practice to the
yeah,
next. But
yeah.
because if you get it's different, you got five ODs versus one OD and 1.5 staff. But making sure that you keep things contained enough that you can focus and not lose control over what you
And,
really want to be doing and what's adding value to the practice.
and it makes those decisions easy. Again, it goes back to how do you make these decisions and not overthink it and question it? Well, if you've got a plan and you've got an idea of exactly what you want to do, it made buying my equipment easy. Do I need, I'm not going to do dry eye here. Do I need an IPL? No. I don't need to think about which one I want because the answer is no. And that's not part of the vision I have. Do I want to do this? No. Do I want to do this? Absolutely. So now that decision became, yes, I need this in my practice. So it made a lot of the decisions, and it continues to make those decisions easier, helps me make less mistakes. Not that I haven't made any, but it helps me make less mistakes because I do the thinking before. And then if I make a mistake, I keep going back to, did I do something that was what the practice needed or what I thought we needed? Was it really the right decision? And when I make a mistake here, it's usually looking back at those, it's usually an external source that influenced me to do something because I thought, everyone has FOMO, I should do this, or I, I made a leap that I deep down probably knew wasn't the right thing to do, but then it makes it easier. I'll say easier, not easy, but easier to fix it because I go, okay, like, did that go with what I'm doing here? Probably not, and I move on. Again, I make a mistake and we fix it, and then we try not to make the same mistakes. But um, I think all of the having that process done ahead of time makes it easier to not make as many mistakes because you're not pulled in as many directions and you're not as influenced by the external world and the Facebook groups and what other people are doing or what your reps tell you should do. I mean, I hear so many people who get into trouble buying equipment because a rep told them, A, it's a tax deduction, or B, it's a cash pay service. And so they get into really big trouble having equipment that really they probably had no business buying. And now they have to create a business around the piece of equipment that they bought. Where if you had really, and that becomes a mistake. But if you had done the thought process ahead of time and thought, do I actually want to do this service? Or am I doing it because I feel a sense of FOMO or think I can make money, but I don't necessarily enjoy it? If you think of that ahead of time, it can make a lot of these mistakes disappear.
It does streamline your decisions to have that
Yes.
clarity on the front end. And that's always I encourage people to really write down exactly what you want to build. Not everything might not all come to fruition. I did a talk before where I asked at the beginning for the audience to take, I said, I'm going to give you a few minutes and write down what you want your practice to look like in 5 years. Be as specific as you want, down to what kind of music do you want playing when people walk in? Like see it, visualize it, feel it. And honestly, Jen, maybe 50% of the people wrote anything down. And I was curious if we could poll if there was any variance.
Yeah.
They did that study, I think, with Harvard a long time ago where they had people write down their goals and the ones who did like 20 years, they tracked them in later in life, made like three times the income as the other ones. So there was, just getting really clear on what it is that you want to build, and the more specific you can be, it starts to streamline your decisions around things like technology. Does this map to my vision, or is it a distraction?
Yep.
Right? Is it
100%.
you don't want to just constantly be chasing the shiny object, but staying true to your long-term vision and making sure that your strategies align with that. So let's wrap this up here where I mentioned we would circle back to at some point. So we're going to do that now. Why a cold start? There's a lot of ODs out there listening right now, and they're weighing, do I cold start? Do I buy an established practice? There's got to be pros and cons to both. What are your thoughts? And why did you make the decision to start new?
So I weighed both. I wrote it down. I mean, I literally wrote a sheet. It's actually in my desk in the next room. I call it like my blueprint of my practice journey. I have a list of the pros of buying a practice, the cons of buying a practice, the pros of cold starting and the cons of cold starting. And I mean, I literally wrote them all down. And I thought about myself at this point in my career and what brought me back to optometry and or seeing patients was really seeing missing patients and missing running a business. And then I thought, well, if I buy somebody else's business, how hard am I going to work to undo what might not be the right business for me? And I was actually first set on buying something. I was looking, and I thought maybe that's the easier route for me, and there was really nothing available. And then my husband said, he's like, why are you so against cold starting? I'm like, well, it's scary. I didn't do it originally. And now I was 42 and I have two kids, and that's terrifying to do. But he said, but you're not going to be happy with anything you buy. You are probably going to walk in there and 100% gut the whole thing. So why not just start from scratch? Oh gosh, I don't know how to do that. So what did I do? I enlisted help, and I asked people who had done it, and I collected, I asked friends who had cold started, and I said, what do you wish you did differently? What was the best thing you did? And I collected so much information, and I literally wrote down what I wanted in a practice. And I spent a lot of time visualizing exactly what it would look like. And I always joke, like, woo woo science aside, it looks exactly like where I am. And I looked at probably 30 spaces, and none of them felt right until I walked into here. And I have big windows. I'm on a main walkable street. That was exactly what I envisioned and wrote down. Um, so it wasn't as hard as I thought. I won't belittle that and say it was easy, but there were parts of it that were easier than I thought because I was so clear cut on what I wanted to do and what types of patients I wanted to see and what I wanted to spend my days talking about. And I thought, I'm only in my early 40s. This will probably be the end of, who knows? I say that now. In 30 years, I'll be on talking about what I'm doing next, but this will likely be the last practice I start, maybe. What do I want to do? If I went every day, what type of patient schedule would get me excited? What types of patients do I want to see? And that's where the blueprint for the cold start came. And I thought, anyone else, any practice I buy, that's somebody else's vision, that's somebody else's process, it's somebody else's plan. Could I go in and fix it and make it my own? Probably. But will I probably spend more money and time than I would if I did it myself? And I took the leap, as scary as it was. And it really, I don't think I could have done it 15 years ago because I wasn't so set in my ways of what I wanted to do. I think there was value in buying a practice and having the committee and having the support and having a large practice that really has supported me here with the decisions I've made. But to me, in the end, once I realized that, I thought there's no other decision for me that's right other than cold starting. And it has been such a great journey. It's fun to create something and to be so to see it come to life and to see people respond to it and to see patients walk in and look around and say, oh, wow, this is very beautiful. Or I love the feel here. I love the vibe. And it's like, wow, I created that. And I was so deliberate, even to the scent we have in the office. Everything is thought through. And to hear people respond to that, I think, wow, that it was my idea and it came to life. And to see people actually see that and feel that, now I can't imagine doing that by buying something. So that's my long answer to your short question.
You said that for you, this was the year of saying no, but I'm glad you said yes to this podcast. So
Oh
it's,
my
it,
podcast always. Yes, yeah, it truly is my year of saying no, but I still enjoy, I'm just happy to be back in practice and people feel that. And my former patients that are finding me, it's so validating what we do and how we impact and touch people. And I think we get so in the weeds of running a business and seeing patients and managing our staff, and we forget what an impact we have on people. And being able to step away and then come back and have people find me and say, I have been searching for you since you left. It's such an unbelievable feeling to think, wow, I didn't realize that my once a year eye exam was that impactful on you, that you've been searching for me and that you found me and now you're here. So I think what we forget is how important our role is and how what we do is so important and special, and that we have such a gift. And I think it took me taking a break to realize that. But you know, but I'm still working on it. I've listened to a podcast with Kayla Ashley and you about communication. So I'm working on we're doing a whole office communication project. So we're just constantly working on that and making mistakes, right? And trying things. And if it doesn't work, go back to the drawing board and go back to the plan and keep going. But it's been a real exciting journey to Cold Start. And I can't wait. We've been open 13 months, so I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Us as well. And thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for sharing your journey here, sharing it on social media. We really look forward to whatever comes next and even that podcast you and I can do in 30 years to talk about whatever you're building at 3 decades from now. But thanks again. Always appreciate your time and always appreciate your insights. And I think people will get a lot out of this who are in a situation where perhaps they're looking for change. Which direction do I go? And I just want people to really understand that experiment, try things, and make the failures and learn from them. You will be better off. It's a little scary as it's happening, but you learn so much from that process. So thank you for coming on again and sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you to Jen, and thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.